Hello everybody, welcome back to Debate Hub. I am Chesh, your master debater, and I am here with Jackson and RJ. We made it, we did it, through some technical difficulties, we got there. I believed in us the whole time, and I hope you did too. Welcome, both of you. I'm so happy to have you back, Jackson, because I've had Jackson here at least once, and this is RJ's first time here. And so I think it'd probably be best to reintroduce Jackson and then introduce RJ, who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into talking about your book, which is super fucking cool. Also, I don't care if we swear within the first 15 seconds, I'm screwed anyway. So, Jackson, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Glad to be back. We're not talking about the politics of doing what was it, marches and stuff this time. So doing sciencey things.
It's a little bit more of a positive situation, I guess, than what kind of the doom and gloom of last time.
Yeah, true.
So, who are you and what do you say you do?
I'm just a nobody on the internet. Don't listen to me.
All right. Goodbye.
I have. All right. Thanks for having me. Good to see you guys.
Quick show.
I'm working on my master's in what is effectively zoology. I have my bachelor's in zoology, and that's really about it. I guess I have a YouTube channel, which is just my name, Jackson Wheat, where I talk about evolution, biodiversity, and sometimes creationism, but not as much as I used to. Because RJ and I kind of covered a lot of the main arguments, and we'll cover yet more as we'll discuss. So
I figure you run out eventually, right?
You would think. However, I heard some new arguments today that I had never heard before. I was watching a Professor Dave video. I'm sure we'll get into that. So, yeah.
All right. RJ, how are you? And who are you? And what do you say you do here?
I'm an old fart who is technically retired. Spent all of my main life doing things other than what I'm doing now. So I've done computer programming and inventory and blah, blah, blah. As a side issue, I was noticing intelligent design and before that, young Earth creationism back in the 1970s and 80s. So I was having as a hobby keeping track of the stupid. And then in the late 1990s, a bunch of impetus came along to where I started studying it in much greater detail and kept at that with a vengeance, down to the point where I had enough material available and had the access to do publishing and stuff. Evolution Slam Dunk was the first off the block there, where I'm trying to fill in the gaps that haven't been covered by anybody else. So the reptile-mammal transition was just high on the list. Why hadn't anybody written a book on how creationists deal with the reptile-mammal transition? And then, by happenstance, the youngin', Jackson, was announcing on a video chat one night that he was thinking of doing a criticism of the Answers in Genesis books, and profligate soul, he shows all the various ones he's physically bought, and I'm going, and he said, would you like to write that with me? And 1/1000th of a second later, I said, well, hell yes. So that's been there, and it grew to the point where I realized, this is going to be like a 2-volume work, and literally, Slam Dunk was as big, or the rocks were there, was literally as big as you can print at Amazon. Mm-hmm. And if it had been, I had to shrink the bibliography down to make it tight so that it would be enough pages for it. So you're looking at the full how big of a book you can do at Amazon.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We do have a chat from Vandalia for 2 that says, so Jackson, how long till we can read your thesis?
Once it's done and published,
eventually,
which is, yeah. I mean,
the time is
I guess I can tell you the sort of bare bones of it. It's on dung beetle iridescence. So if that interests you at all, then maybe this will interest you. I have no idea.
I think there's something
that crossover
special.
Audience of dung beetle lovers and iridescence lovers. It's just perfect there. Oh, I will mention.
Those are 2 big fields.
I'm excited to have, I think there's something special about when a retired person specifically, because they are in a position that they're like, I can do whatever the hell I want. I'll stay at this shit all day, bitches. What are you going to do about it?
I don't have to worry about getting up for work and the like, and I can just if some idiot creationist makes a mistake of giving an open, no-cost lecture over in Idaho, and that's only like a half-hour drive, I'm there, and I can do all of that kind of stuff. Which somebody, if they're as Jackson is in, where he's got a job and college, which has like stuff to do, there's a lot of pressures on that. So between the two of us, I think that we make a really neat team, because I have the sense of history because I've been studying this longer than he's been alive. So I've got a vast array of old stuff that's disappeared from a lot of the current apologetics. There's been an evolution to creationism over the years. It's not quite the same as it was in the 60s.
Irony.
Yes, very much. And Jackson had his fingers on the pulse of existing stuff. He's at the college level of the little misunderstandings I might have had about stuff, understanding things just from the outside internet point of view. He's got a different perspective on it that we can cross-check against one another, and between the two of us, we can just kick butt.
I think it's a great team. You've got like you're covering like almost generations of that point, so it makes it a lot harder for people to slip things in. And Athens beat me to a question that I was going to ask you guys. We just recently had Dr. Dan on Monday, and he was giving us kind of a walkthrough about his encounters with Dr. Jensen.
Well, he is a PhD.
He's a doctor. Actually a doctor.
Yeah, unfortunately, he is.
And I was going to ask,
unlike
if
Kent
you guys
Hovind,
have thoughts
who
on
says, well, Dr. Dan is a friend of ours. We're all doing our anti-creationism stuff together. Of course, Dan is doing it. He's doing a lot of like population genetics stuff, and he's going at this at a technical level that
a lot of math.
I think it's a lot of math, and the way that he pierces right down to the core issue and just tears it apart is so much fun to watch. But Jensen is he's a slippery one.
What do you think, RJ?
On my own, I forgot to mention, I do a little, not nearly as well tread YouTube as the much more professionally done stuff that Jackson does. My little clunky little evolution hour. My little gig is going through the reference bibliography that the creationists don't necessarily put in their books, or if they do have a reference bibliography, where exactly are they citing them? So Jensen's previous book was the thing that I've spent like the multiple months on, going through source by source by source, compiling a reference bibliography for it to find out and discover that he's misrepresenting 50% of the sources, technical papers that he cites.
Is that replacing Darwin one, or is that Traced?
Yeah, that one then. Then now I moved on to Traced. That's a different reverse, because it has a smaller reference bibliography. It actually has one this time, but you don't know where he's citing them. So I'm going through page by page, source by source, and finding out how much of it's retread. Very little of it appears to have been retread from the 2017 book. Instead, he's making fresh, which is delightful. In a nutshell, what Jensen is doing, Dan has come at it from a different direction because he's got the genetics and that's his field. He's an actual geneticist. I'm just a little geek looking at the sources. But what he's functionally trying to do is take the existing data he's compiled himself and say, okay, you things are 100,000 years old. This is the flood time, and this is now. So that's all happening since the flood. And all you got to do is go, and bingo. Well, that been pointed out deliciously, where one of the haplotypes he was talking about, in the 1500s Renaissance medieval Europe, except they have found the haplotype in Neolithic bodies from like 20,000 years ago. Oops.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a problem. Yeah.
It's like trying to compress everything in American history down to last week. So you've got the Civil War taking place a month ago.
Right. RJ, we are starting to lose you. If you want to try and switch off your camera and see if that'll fix it,
My mug will not be missed.
My internet is also fairly bad, so if you also want me to switch off at some point, I can.
You're okay, but why do you both suck?
Because I live in Louisiana. I have an excuse. you know.
And I'm on a little portable Wi-Fi and all that. That's at no cost. Although to be fair, even the ones who shell out a gigantic amount of money for the access to this stuff can find glitches occurring on their feed. So I go, ha ha ha.
That's true.
I can't say
That's
anything.
true. Dapper
I'm
does
in
have
Canada.
problems sometimes.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I'm not
Dapper
worried
pays
about
a lot
paying
more money
for it.
than I do.
He did
So,
that
yeah.
to me. I had him on to talk about his Power Rangers book when he first got that one, and he just like the internet was just like, it's like, all right, well,
Yeah,
I guess
he
the
had
internet
me
hates Power
on-
Rangers.
I think it was Jackson with Jackson, or one of those episodes, and like after 20 minutes, he just lost all feed,
Oh wow!
and so he was like, "I'm very mad about this."
oh wow!
Understandable.
Another fun thing
Yeah.
that occurs because of Dan and Erica Gutsick-Gibbon and Jackson and all the rest is that when I see their material, if I don't have their sources in my reference bibliography, in they go, as well as working out, ooh, that's a neat little thing. We got to mention that in Rocks Were There, Volume 2, etc.
Do you guys have like a database? Or like, are you using a database?
Oh, I do.
where
Yeah,
you
I have a
put-
spreadsheet that currently has about almost 70,000 sources in it, and of which I've got a little over 11,000 anti-evolution works from about 2,000 different writers.
wow.
And I can tell you that they have cited about 6,500 technical sources so far. That's to be compared with my data set of a bit over, I think, 31,000 technical papers and another 10,000 general science works.
And I imagine that's
So yeah, I have
helpful.
a bit of a database.
Yeah, I imagine that's incredibly helpful for Jackson and Erica and Dan and Dapper and anybody kind of that exists in this sphere, that not only do you have a pulse on the newest stuff that they're pulling up, because I know, like, Jackson's, you're working on your thesis, so you're, like, right at the forefront of that, and so is Erica. I know Dapper's out of school now, but he's still got his pulse on things. Or he's still got his finger on the pulse, I guess is the analogy, but...
Plus, also with the videos that I typically write, I'm also looking for, like, recent material on these subjects. Like, I just did a video on the reptile-mammal transition. It was the lava lizard's tail. And so much of the video was, it's RJ. RJ is one of my script editors, and so I even quoted Evolution Slam Dunk in the video with regards to Probane Ignathus.
Hey, listen, the links
plug.
are down below, and if you guys need me to add any links, you guys just let me know, and I'll make sure they get thrown in there.
For all the other books in the Twitter feed, and that you can put them in there as well.
Send those over. I'll get them. Make sure that they're added.
Yeah, they're already in the Twitter lineup earlier up on the thing. If you scroll back up in there, you should be able to find them in there.
Perfect.
And periodically, I put a linking out to them because I like my royalties.
I will make that. I mean, fair.
Oops, we're freezing up here.
That is fair enough. So your book is. The Rocks Were There, right? I have one gripe with you. Your text is unreadable.
So it's something of an encyclopedic source. It's written more as an encyclopedia of like.
No, the text on the
references?
cover. The text on the cover.
Oh, okay. So funny enough, the actual if you get
there's
the
a little
electronic version,
that blame me. Blame me on that one because I was the one that got the cover bit and the font style that there. Some of it bleed out, so that's all my fault.
It's okay. I'm mostly
it is
just
fixed though on the
you,
electronic version.
Okay.
It's moved over, but yeah, in the print version, the is slightly
It's
slightly,
the white on white,
invisible.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yep.
listen,
Blame
next
the
time
old
you
man.
guys
Blame
call
the old
me.
man.
Call me. I'll make sure it looks nice for you. Don't worry about it. All right.
Oh well,
All right, I
that
had to
would
get
be
my one gripe out of
accidents.
the way.
because
Accidents happen. After all, here I am. So.
Oh, that's why you're marching for abortion rights.
my focus is
I don't
on
want to deal
the
with this
stuff
crap. What are you
inside
talking
the
about?
book.
It has to be here.
And to make sure that everything in the book is extremely accurate, and then I'm the one that carries the lifting on the index so that we have a really comprehensive index and people can find the information that's in the book. And to me, the greatest compliment I get is if someone says, if it's not in the Rocks Were There, you can't be very prominent in the anti-creationism field because we didn't mention you.
Ooh.
Yeah,
April. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
April is asking a question that they said, I'm looking for a replacement for R and Raw for my evolution fix. How do these guys feel about atheist babies?
About what?
Atheist babies.
Oh, atheist babies. Oh, no, rocks are not atheists. Babies are not atheists.
You
Sorry.
did write a book about the rocks being there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah, they.
the people writing about them might be, but the rocks themselves aren't. They're actually mostly Hindu. No, I'm just kidding. Uh,
Ra is a very
No, they're-
sharp character, but he's not
they're
an
Buddhist.
absolute source of useful things. He can have his little axes to grind and perceptions on stuff that, yeah, it's not the worst sin, compared
Everyone's
to
got
people.
their stuff. Everyone's
I
got
would
their
say,
thing.
the biology stuff. Yeah, he's great on the biology stuff. I'm not so sure about the philosophy stuff. Although I'm not a philosophy person myself, and so I would say, don't go to me. If you want philosophy, I can point you in the direction of other people. But like
The eventual religion book
Jeff
will be
Lauder.
diving into a lot of that.
Well,
Because
I
it will
think
relate to the whole issue about the difference between a belief system and factual information and what the standards of evidence are for things and blah, blah, blah.
Well, there's also, I think April brings up an interesting point, that if they're looking for information on biology and don't want this additional baggage, then going
Right.
to Jackson or RJ is great. But if you're looking to
Sure.
learn about philosophy, I'll throw one out and I'll say, go and check out the Answers in Reason. They're going to be probably your best bet on having like a reasonable discussion about why and how when it comes to philosophy, particularly because one of the people that works with them is moving towards his PhD in philosophy. So, or you can come to me and
Also,
I'll just tell
yeah.
you philosophy's
The
stupid.
thing is, I look at it
Jeff
from the
Lauder
methods
on
direction.
Twitter is another one.
Jeff Lauder, yeah. There's definitely people you can go look for. So it's one of those things where if you're looking to separate those two things, which
Yes.
they're related, but you can definitely like cater what you're looking for. I think you're absolutely going to be on the right track going in and finding Jackson and going to find Dr. Dan, who was on Monday, or going to find Dapper, who's going to be on tomorrow. Actually, we're going to be watching Ken Ham and Bill Nye debating.
Ooh,
and
ouch.
yeah.
That was such a lame debate.
It took us an hour to get through his 5-minute opening because Landon was pissed.
It's like the only reason that Nye I think won is Ken Ham is the worst debater on the planet.
Right?
Right? I mean, like if you watch it, in my
When was the last time you watched
estimation,
it?
Nye, when it came out 2014.
Oh, okay, so it's been a
Yeah,
while.
it's
So-
been that long for me.
In my
Yeah.
estimation, Nye did better, but only slightly better, and only because Ken Ham is literally the worst like public speaker on the planet. Like to do a debate, you have to be light on your feet, right?
Yeah.
A debate is not necessarily about data, although having data helps. It's about rhetoric, and Ken Ham is bad at rhetoric, he's so bad at it. Nye at
Two
least had some
problems
facts
with
to
him.
present.
Two big problems with him. One, he's not as agile a debater as, say, the late Dwayne Gish was. Gish was very, there's the Gish Gallop, and there's a reason why he had the reputation he did. The other is Ken Ham is an ignoramus. He doesn't even know his own creationism, literally.
Yeah.
That he thinks things about creationism that were basically the way his brain congealed back in the 1980s. And he isn't even aware of the content of his museum and his Ark encounter, because he says stuff that the things in the museum doesn't fit.
There's something
Yes.
so special about the consistency that I have experienced of older educated people just being nothing but infuriated with the existence of Ken Ham and how bad he is.
Well, he was
I
so
mean-
insufferable. That's why there's Creation Ministries International, because they had the split
Right.
between.
Yeah, that's
the
why he's not in
old guard group
Australia.
that were- yeah.
Amazing. All right,
To
so-
RJ's point, if
Yeah,
you
go ahead.
watch Joel Duff, he talks about the
Yes.
current splitting of within AIG. So Ken Ham is
Yeah.
taking it upon himself to split AIG
The
again
purge.
because some of his creationists are getting too evolution-y. So yeah.
Gup
And
says
he's
when I
going
first saw the
after their
debate,
top
I was...
guns. My God,
Yeah.
It's Todd Wood and Kavanaugh and Kurt Wise. These are the people who actually have degrees and have some cred in terms of evidential gravitas.
Mhm.
And it's like it's like Stalin bringing in all the generals and killing them off before he makes his alliance with Hitler. I mean, this is just a bad move.
Gup said when I first saw the debate, I was a creationist, and I still thought Ken Ham did a terrible job.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, there was a poll done, like, I think it was by Answers in Genesis, and it was like something like 9% of people said they thought Ken Ham won. Like 9%. He did very poor. And the audience, I don't know if they gave it to the audience there, but it was at least online, so it was the people watching from like the AIG feed. But the audience there was creationist, and you can tell they were creationist because they didn't laugh at a single joke that Nye told, and they laughed at everything Ham said.
The closest one they laughed at was the one right at the very beginning about the bow tie. After that, it was like, nah.
Yeah, nope, not one.
Now, okay,
and
Ken
Ham is known for his stand-up, after all.
Oh, yeah, okay. So there's a... I know this is a little bit off topic, but I'm very curious because this is one of my kind of more favorite debates that I tend to lean forward when I'm looking at debating, and it was Christopher Hitchens and Stephen Fry when they were debating, is the Catholic Church a force for good? And they were debating
I don't think I've seen that one, but
a politician. You guys haven't seen that one?
No. My go-to is typically Jeff Lauder and Frank Turek because it's fun watching Frank Turek get like absolutely destroyed.
I mean, that's fair. It'd be fun to watch that man get dunked on.
Turek is another one who is sort of a mini Ken Ham in the sense that he doesn't know nearly enough about the things he's trying to wade into.
Oh God,
All he does is rely on authority figures. So he relies on Prager University. He relies on the stuff from Steve Meyer.
Imagine relying on Prager U.
Yeah.
Well, hey, they're a university, don't you know?
What could go wrong? They're a university, yeah?
I'm honestly surprised they haven't had him on yet, honestly.
Did you see that there's a new thing coming, or a new thing that's been out on, like, the Daily Wire that is Jordan Peterson going through Exodus? So instead of, like, Answers in Genesis, it's, like, a big old Exodus review, and he's got, like, this round table discussion, and, like, the main PragerU guy is there.
You know what? If anybody that wants to look at that will want to keep
I think I have heard of that
in their head, asking when they think the Exodus took place, and will this come up as a topic matter? Because for those of you who know the biblical chronology, there is a really severe divide, independent of whether or not they're religious or not, as to whether they go with the traditional dating, which is around 1450 BCE for the Exodus, versus the actual possible historical dating, which is around 1150, 1200 BCE, which is centuries apart. And you can instantly identify. Frank Turek, for example, goes with the 1450 date. Even though he's from the intelligent design camp that has regular chronology, he's still thinking Bishop Usher class. And it's extremely difficult to find somebody that will accept the 1200 BCE date and not start sliding into apostasy as they realize, there's really not a hell of a lot of evidence for it. So you pretty soon you got your digital Hammurabi and that bunch that moved down the rabbit hole on that. So that's the one to go. When was the Exodus? And you can ask them the date and find out whether or not they're willing to come clean as to when they think that is and on what basis. And at that point, they will go into fistfights with one another, and you can watch with popcorn.
That is always a good time.
Yeah. RJ's a concept RJ likes to bring up is called the map of time. And something that is always fun to do with creationists, and really even more so with, like, in my opinion, intelligent design people, because they pass themselves off as the, like, the earth is old and these things happen in the past. And you say, okay, well, when did this happen? And they go, I don't know. Like, everything you ask them, I have no idea when that happened. And it's
the Jehovah's Witnesses had that with who visited my house, had exactly that same problem, where they're kind of really vague about stuff and even vague about the sciences. The one little older Jehovah's Witness tried to tell me that the scientists think the universe is 27 billion years old.
Okay.
So
Okay.
tell us a little
Somehow.
bit about your book, and you kind of told us how you guys got together and working together. What was the deciding factor about? Well, tell us what your book is supposed to be, and then
Yeah.
we'll start talking about a little bit.
Hold on that
like,
one.
the concept.
Heavy lifting, Jackson.
So, funny as it might be, you saw the size of the book. It's only 7 chapters. And the reason is it's divided up by topic, essentially.
Okay.
And sometimes some of the chapters are kind of divided up by like author, sort of, because Menton is prolific. So it's basically we have it divided up into sections based on topic, and the first topic is sort of epistemology of science. We talk about the divide between like observational and historical science. We talk about the reptile mammal transition as sort of retreading things that have already been done, as well as sort of setting the stage. Chapter 2 was radiometric dating, and so that's RJ talks about. That's RJ drafted that one, and so we talk about all these different arguments that creationists try to put forth to show that radiometric dating isn't reliable. The Earth is actually 6 to 10,000 years old, and they've all failed. Every single one of them fails either because you have guys like Andrew Snelling who send in like random samples to commercial like dating companies and does like no analysis of the minerals or whatever, stuff like that. Chapter 3 is it's sort of about AJ Monty White, who is this older creationist, and he wrote this. They let him write this long chapter that covers a whole bunch of stuff, so we get to like sort of run the gambit on stuff. The next chapter is what is it? Is that when creationists who should know better? Where we talk about like genetics? I think that's 4. Let's see. 5 is kinds, the kind chapter, which was really fun to write because creationists don't know what kinds are. And there was some very bizarre goalpost shifting in that chapter, which we can go into further if you want. It involves hamsters, which I'll leave it at that for the moment.
It involves
chapter 6.
hamsters.
It does. It involves hamsters. We'll
buy the
back.
book. Figure it out.
6 is. Oh my goodness, what was 6? It was on.
Look.
Yeah, take a look, RJ. Is that the Menton chapter?
More evidence for evolution.
Parts? Right, so that's what, like vestigial structures, transitional fossils.
On feathered theropods. We got stuff on the DNA as information, vestigial organs. That's all in that chapter.
Right.
And
then
we
chapter
spent
7
a lot
was
of time. Dodging geology. That's our little foray into that.
Oh,
There's
that's right.
Way more geology in book 2.
Yeah. So, that was fun.
Plus 3 whiz-bang appendices, a chronology of the geology thing that's easy to use, a complete listing of the animal phyla so that you can compare that stuff with what the creationists deal with, and a thing on the fluidity of the DNA code, which relates to that origins or bust issue. So we crammed a lot of shit into that volume.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Now, did you write 1 assuming you would not have a 2 when you started and then made that decision later? Because I do know it's titled Volume 1.
It started out as a single book. And then about partway through, I'm going, this is going to be so big, I don't think we can do it as a single volume. And so I talked him into splitting it up, and it turned out, because we originally had actually more chapters. And so divided it up properly, that we thought, okay, we can pull it off as a second book. And then it turned out that the first book was just barely big enough, almost too big to actually print on the thing. And it's extremely likely the next one will be comparably sized.
Yeah, we were gonna. So we started out with just because our base is the 4 New Answers books, and originally I just thought there was only 1 New Answers book, and then found out there's 4, which is why. Yeah,
they breed like flies.
So then we. Yeah, and they consume just as informational material.
And they eat
Well, and
shit.
remember, CMI cribs
Yeah.
that stuff. So some of the old answers books are then taken over in new editions
Yes.
done at CMI. So you've got these
Mm.
multiple editions, and some of the newer editions are, from a scholar's point of view, it's just a mess.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you would have a book with a 2007 copyright date, but yet the edition has stuff from like 2019. So
Do
clearly
you
they've
guys
done
have-
some editing.
Do you guys find it like frustrating and difficult to try and kind of slog your way through like this cesspool of like you just kind of got to get through the swamp of going through all of their information and all of their books and like how do you not just, end it all?
It sort of depends, because, well, some of them
Or
are
just like, Q, I'm retired.
more. Some are more fun to go through than others. Like,
Right.
I'll give you for instance. I went through 8 blog posts by Gunter Beckley for Professor Dave not too long ago,
Dear, yeah.
and that was a slog because he is so pretentious.
He's a detail fiddler.
Yeah, and you have to go and look at like every single paper he cites to be like, oh, is he representing this correctly? No, he's not. He lied. Okay, what a surprise. But like for a lot of guys like Minton, or Georgia Purdom or Bodie Hodge, or most of the claims they make, you can just be like, no, that's bullcrap. No, you don't have to jump in and read a technical paper, a 7 to 10 page technical paper to figure out whether or not they're lying about it.
And then there is the gift of the gods. Menton was a spectacular example of that in that chapter on with the homology stuff. It turned out, by happenstance, he had based a large part of his argument on an old 1890s book that he claimed had made all these bad claims about vestigial organs.
Oh, right.
And lo and behold, the book was available online. So we could download the original text, and we discovered everything he claimed about that book was wrong. The book was perfectly accurate, and he was misrepresenting the contents. That's all in the book. We go into it, and it's an indication that not only was Benton was a jerk at the superficial level of the vestigial organ claim, but on the specific matter of this guy that he was attacking, he was getting all the facts wrong.
Yeah,
and that kind
sometimes...
of I love that kind of research. It is exhilarating for me, but it is something that if you have the kind of mind that gets all eyes glazing over with footnotes, it can be laborious.
Yeah, do you guys find that your book is almost like, here's all the tea, boom.
We aim to be comprehensive.
Right.
We one of the things that we do, I've stolen a lot of words from RJ over our years of being in cahoots, and one of them is daisy chaining.
I'm a bad influence.
And so I disagree.
As you should be.
But the concept of daisy chaining is basically you can see when one author has made an argument and then somebody else has cribbed it and then somebody else has cribbed from the cribber. And so you can track the argument back to its source, because a lot of times there will be like edits to the argument. So you can see how the argument has evolved each time as it's been used.
Ariel Roth
we did that with...
So is this not just the this backtracking the evolution of whatever you're getting at the end, and you're just following it back to before it branched off? Oh,
who made the mistake to begin with?
Right.
Mistake.
Yeah,
it was an accident.
We've got one in the new book. This will be a little teaser regarding Andrew Snelling, the creationist geologist.
Well, I've heard some things about him.
Oh, yeah. And in this case, this was we're not unique in this. Other people have spotted the same mistake in other areas, but there is a claim that's being made routinely in the creationist literature about radioactive dating of volcanic rocks and how potassium argon will have anomalously young dates or old dates for new deposits. That's not the area that we're slamming into him on. It's that he copied stuff from Andrew Snelling, and he has particular numbers in the thing that he copies from Andrew Snelling. If you went back and look at the original Andrew Snelling and then looked at the original papers he's drawing on, science papers from Dalrymple and all the rest, it turns out that Austin had written down the wrong column of numbers for the dates of the rock, not the dates of the rock, but the amount of radioactive material that had been detected. The wrong numbers. They all have times 10 to the something or other. And so he must have confused that. Snelling repeats the wrong numbers again and again and again, which means, one, he's just copying Andrew Snelling or Steve Austin, and that he had obviously never gone back to the original material to check out to see if the numbers were accurate. So he's a lazy secondary parasite.
Now, do you think he's doing
and you can
that
find lots
on
of stuff like that.
purpose, or do you think he's?
I think it's due to just laziness. That the apologetic mind easily riffs off of the routines. So that and when you get down to like somebody like a Frank Turek talking about religion, he's doing exactly the same thing, except he's not talking about science. He's just riffing off of the approved statements. Now, other cases, there's another juicy example we're going to be bringing up in the book, again about Andrew Snelling, where now you have the choice: either he is an idiot or he's being directly manipulative.
Did Snelling not make it into volume 1?
This
did.
example,
we talked about him.
Okay.
And this, yes, Snelling. Example. The diamond, radiocarbon dating of diamond. We have a big section on that because that and Michael and there's part of the teachings of people that are riffing off of that. This is French ammo that we're bringing up, new examples, and this one I stumbled across just accidentally because Snelling was making a claim about technology. And he was arguing that it turns out structures that they're connecting up with these various tree rings, there's only 2 trees that are involved that are actually living trees that are used as the core of this. And if you remove those, then they can't really calibrate all of this. And it's an example of the luck of the thing that now we can get the original sources. So there was the original book that he had copied the information from and the original technical paper that book had gotten the information from, all perfectly valid. What was missing from Snelling's version in 2017 was the axis along the left-hand side that told what they meant. And it turns out they weren't individual trees, they were groups of trees. And the higher they were, had more samples than the ones down below, which means you had your best data in the stuff that was more recent, and the farther back you went in time, the fewer samples they had. Which means not 2 trees were involved, but over a dozen in each one of the little rectangles that he showed. And yet he had put a great big arrow in 2 trees, so either he doesn't know how to read a chart and mysteriously left off that information when he published the version of the thing that he showed in the article, or he knows exactly what the chart meant and deliberately lied about it.
I only want to copy this much of it.
And that happens a lot.
Oh, that
right?
RJ, you're cutting out. RJ, you're cutting out. Do you want to drop and come back in and see if that helps? Okay, go ahead, Jaxie.
I wrote or I co-authored a script for Professor Dave on Gunter Beckley a while back to give another example, which we'll be bringing up Beckley again in volume 2. Beckley cites, for instance, this trace fossil in the Precambrian, and he says, "Oh, well, this can't be attributed to a bilaterian animal because protists some protists make similar tracks." And he cites this 2015 paper. Well, the original paper about this trackway had also cited the 2015 paper and said, "Well, it can't be a protist track for these reasons." So again, it's like, well, you clearly read it. You cited the paper. So are you just lying about it? Like, I don't believe he's
the same as what Dr. Dan was saying about Jensen. He is just like, I just took this and replaced it with this, or I just put this and put this on top of this with zero justification. And these things are not you can't just interpose one on the other. It sounds like the exact same kind of problem.
Right. Like the mutation rate and substitution rate stuff, where he's just like, yeah, no, I just used the mutation rate. It's like, no, you can't do that. That's not okay. You're not allowed.
Do you guys find, just to make sure, RJ, can we hear you?
Yeah. The point I was going to make before I disintegrated was that overall, the majority of the mistakes that anti-evolutionists have made historically are not errors of commission, genuine goof-ups like the Snelling ones I just mentioned, but what they leave out. The vast majority of the failure of their argument is errors of omission. And so the whole point of the reptile mammal transition book was to go through and show just how much they're leaving out, and that every single one of them does that. That shows you how they can construct the arguments that they do, not because they've been thorough and meticulous in going through the whole thing and making sure they discuss all the data and account for it. They can't.
Yeah.
Is there anybody, do you guys actually, I'm very curious, do you have any honorable mentions, like arguments or individuals that didn't make into the book that you were like, we would love to have this person, and maybe we'll see them because now you're working on volume 2, maybe we'll see them in volume 2, but they just didn't quite make the cut?
Well, sure. I mean, there are lots and lots of young Earth creationists and intelligent design guys out there, and even some of the ones we did talk about, we couldn't cover everything just for space reasons. Like, we didn't cover any of the Meyer-Beckley, like, Cambrian explosion stuff.
Right.
All their arguments that, like, this is when God must have created all the animals. You know,
we're going to be alluding
that
it
sort
in
of
volume
stuff.
2.
Yeah, we'll be hitting that stuff hard. We didn't talk about all the arguments regarding, like, not stabilimorph. I mean, stabilimorph is the correct term. Living fossils. All the arguments about living fossils and how that's, that means evolution hasn't happened. You know, again, we just couldn't cover that sort of stuff. We'll be talking about that in volume 2, and
yeah, we had a little bit of it in the first book. I'm trying to keep track, in part because of the index and the reference bibliography, that I can cross-check to see stuff that didn't come up in book 1 that we go, aha, yeah, we can bring that in the second novel, the second story, to make sure that we got all of that covered in that.
You guys think you're going to stop at volume 2?
I think so. We will have.
I think for now, yeah.
Spread it through. I think somewhere down the line, I theoretically have some other books in line to fill in some of the other zones, which Jackson may or may not want to become a co-author on, but I'm perfectly capable of diving into it head first on that. One is the Kulturkampf book, which is about the history of the creationist movement and how they try to take over education and society. And so that's basically the stuff from the 1960s down to the present. And so the stuff that was kind of the first couple of chapters of the original Troubles in Paradise project.
You guys haven't seen my CRT presentation, have you?
Oh my God! Well, that's an example of what you've got with the buzzword elements.
Yeah, and I'll send you a link to it when we're done here. I'll just watch like the first like couple of minutes of, like, it was like a 2-hour stream. All of it was like that part was only like the first 30 minutes.
You know, I took a critical theory class where you are taught how to look at literature through the lens of like critical race theory and feminist theory and postmodernist theory and all, and it's like, I didn't care. I took it before CRT became a bad word, but like nobody cared.
It's okay.
When we did this,
CRT we only became a bad word because Fox News made it a bad word. I tracked the whole thing back. Yeah.
So Christopher Rufo, who is from the Discovery Institute, so he is an intelligent design guy, and you can see the crossover between Hold on,
I'm sorry. I have to stop you. Did you just tell me that Christopher Rufo, the guy who co-opted and made an entire PR campaign to ruin critical race theory, is an intelligent design guy?
He got brought in as one of the pundits. You have to remember the roots of the Discovery. You have to remember the roots of the Discovery Institute, and the word that I use, and that's going to be the title of the book that will be on the thing, is Kulturkampf. Bismarck's old phrase about the culture struggle that he had over the Catholic.
It really got you, huh, Chesh?
Motherfucker.
So you have to remember these things are deeply interwoven. Conservatism and religion and these like religious anti-science propaganda. This is all very deeply interwoven.
Shit ass. The one thing that I didn't finish researching before we went live on that was Christopher Rufo. I can't believe I fucking son of a bitch.
He didn't start out with the Discovery Institute, but has fallen into their orbit, as quite a few of the newer characters are. And there's a crossover going on. Another crossover that brings you all the way over to Ken Ham's creationism is the Council on National Policy that Tony Perkins Corporations and Weyrich that founded back in the 1970s that basically staffed the Trump administration. That network, the thing I would always love reporters to start thinking about is on any issue of public moment, you will want to know how many of the people responding are culture camp conservatives, creationist mindsets, and that you would discover that your numbers would drop catastrophically, that if you looked at the people other than that block to see how many are climate skeptics or are concerned about critical race theory or all the rest, that yes, there are some non-culture camp creationists who believe that, but they're the big block involved, and that area has not been properly done. The most you'll find with polling is they're kind of dividing it as to whether they're generically religious or not, and if they're Protestant or Catholic, and that's about as far as it goes, or if they're politically conservative or politically liberal, or if they're Republican or Democrat. But those terms are squishy because I remember actual Republicans, and the current crop
You mean like Mitt
I call them
Romney?
rhino Trumpistas. Yeah, well, beyond that, I am old enough to Republicans, less conservative Republicans, full out liberal Republicans. They existed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They don't exist now. The most you have now are moderate conservatives and extreme conservatives, and Marjorie Taylor Greene jump off the crazy train creation conservatives. That's the rate. It's extremely narrow. It's far more ideologically not diverse than, say, the Democratic Party that has some left wing and then people that are coming in the middle, where you got Manchin and that's blocked down in mid range in terms of things, and very conservative on some things, particularly energy policy. And you've got even in the heyday in the 1970s, when the Democratic Party was probably more generically liberal than it would be completely today, although Bernie Sanders and stuff would have had trouble being even in the Democratic Party in the 1970s. He would have been a little bit too left-wing on that aspect, but it had a much larger range. So that's where my historian's eye comes in here. And one of the things that gobsmacks me about so many people of age 50 and under is how unaware they are of the history of these things, to where they take the current conditions as if it's always been that way. And no.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's what's so funny about that little PragerU gotcha. Every couple weeks, PragerU will tweet who started the KKK or which political party started the KKK.
Yeah.
And they and everyone in the comment section goes, which party is it affiliated with today? You know?
Right.
It's
and this is where you bring in people like Dinesh D'Souza and Coulter and that crowd, where you have it all comes in under the culture camp narrative. It probably won't shock you. Ann Coulter is an anti-evolutionist who's a climate science denier. Starting to get a pattern here, aren't we? And so you when you start looking at the roots of anti-evolutionism, it's hyper politically conservative. There are only a handful, as in I can count them on one hand and have fingers left over, non-hyper conservative anti-evolutionists over the last 150 years.
William Jennings Bryan. I'm sorry, 150?
150.
Jesus
Since Darwin came
Christ.
along, I can only think of William Jennings Bryan, who would be like a Bernie Sanders left-winger who was an anti-evolutionist. That's one.
Okay.
Because he was progressive in every respect except for that anti-evolutionism.
Every time I have one of your guys' group of people on, you have a whole group and that do like pro science, anti-creationism, and every time I ever talk to any single one of you guys, on air or off air, I get my mind blown by some random factoid that you guys just breeze over, and I'm just like, wait.
So, Chesh, you want me to tell you what the hamster thing was?
Yes.
What that was a reference to?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so actually Dapper and I discussed this with a creationist not too long ago named Monkman. So if you watch that, you already know. So Georgia Purdom and Bodie Hodge wrote a chapter in one of the New Answers books, which we covered in chapter 5. And they were trying to argue what the kind limits are, because that's one of the big issues in creationism is how do you delineate one kind from another? Mm-hmm. You'd think if they were easy to do, they could just do it, but whatever. Anyway, so one of the so they draw a hard boundary at reproducibility. Can two populations reproduce and generate any sort of offspring fertile or infertile. If they can, they're in the same kind.
Right.
Footnote: humans can fertilize Assyrian hamster eggs when the zona pellucida is removed.
Who's been
male
fucking
human
hamsters?
sperm. So it's actually was a fertility test.
Mhm.
It was actually a fertility test when you take the zona pellucida, which is this little protein membrane that surrounds ova, which is to filter out correct sperm.
Protect it.
Then our human sperm can actually cause the first set of divisions to occur, which is all maternally guided, and
because we're so closely
we can trigger that
as mammals. By the way, what happens
had
in
to
the
say,
hamster wheel stays in the hamster wheel.
So Purdom says, so I was unaware of this. I didn't know this. I don't know if RJ did, but I certainly didn't know this. She brings it up in a footnote and says, yeah, we know that humans can do this because she has a genetics background. So she did I think it was cancer research for her getting her PhD.
Right.
And so she's in the medical field area. So she was aware of this. She says, yeah, we know this can happen, but it only causes a few divisions, so we don't count it. And I was like, huh? What
this is the Lord hath delivered them unto your hands, where the creationist is literally calling attention to the thing that's blowing their foot off.
I've served this to you on a silver platter. It is sperm
Thank
with
you for
hamster
bringing it
eggs. Up. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, and it was like Menton bringing up that 1890s book, that if I wouldn't have known that if he hadn't gone out of his way to bring the damn thing up.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll do that. They'll be like, yeah, don't worry about this thing, or this completely, shreds the evolutionist argument. And then you read it and you're like, did you read this? Why would you bring this up? It doesn't help you at all.
You brought it up?
One of the things
you brought it up
in volume 2 that I think was going to be a major contribution is a complete breakdown of the Ark Encounter list of kinds, which is like pulling teeth.
I'm very excited for that.
The Answers in Genesis has a picture of it that you can see that's blurry, but literally there's no listing at their website. They never give the whole thing so you can tell what's on it, or let alone the documentation as to how they arrived at which kinds are which. Well, we've thanks to Gutsick Gibbon, who got one high-resolution picture and worked out a spreadsheet. I had a high-resolution picture I got from somebody else, and I was cross-comparing them. I've created a master spreadsheet to compare against hers. We will have a definitive list of the 1,400 kinds and break down in great detail why they're listed in the order that they are, which is not alphabetical, it's evolutionary order. Ha ha ha.
Yeah,
this is just all the tea. This is all the drama.
They just kind of went to Wikipedia and downloaded a list of the families. That's basically all they did.
And the irony is that you've got all in the little footnotes. Like there was a thing that I just discovered that was going to be in there as well. Matthew Serhati, who's arguing that the one small pandas are in a different family group. That means technically he's in conflict with the treatment at the Ark Encounter, which has them as a separate family. So literally, you're seeing the evolution from one family into another, courtesy of the creationists.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
One of my other favorite bits from that chapter was Jean Leitner wrote this paper on the mammalian ark kinds, in which she outlined just for mammals. But the fun thing about it was she said,
"Forget the cognitum."
Well, that's what I was gonna say. So so typically what they say is the family is the kind, which doesn't mean anything. But then you get to bovidae, which is cows, goats, and sheep, and antelopes. So they're all in bovidae. Well, then Leitner just says, we've split up bovidae into the subfamilies because people tend to think of these as different groups. People tend to think of goats and sheep as not being closely related to cows.
People tend to do a lot of things. I don't need.
It's the people's choice taxonomy approach.
Yes.
I mean, that seems to be a misnomer.
Silly.
Well, it seems to be a complete misnomer of science. That science, just because it's something that seems to make sense, doesn't mean it's actually the case. It's a problem with things being like, what's the word? There's a word for it where it's not non-cognizant. It's brain.
Unconscious?
No, it's when you think that something like follows and it's actually different.
Oh, non sequiturs.
A non sequitur?
No, fuck.
I
Brain.
don't know.
I'll figure it out. Whatever. I'm dumb.
I'm very bad at telepathy.
Oh,
No,
well,
there's
but
a
all three of
there's
us
a word that
are
it's
glitching up on it, so
essentially
no matter.
yeah, it essentially means that when things are easy to understand because you have your standard line of thinking as you do as a human.
Oh, unintuitive?
Yes, thank you. It's not. Yes, it's unintuitive, not intuitive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we know
Jesus
from actual
Christ.
science, the universe has no obligation to be tidy on our behalf.
Right.
So all that stuff on quantum physics and relativity theory and black holes and dark matter, and as well the whole dynamics of why species exist at all, how gene flow occurs across organisms, what's the big impact of climate change and circumstance as species adapt to their environment and all of that. It becomes layer on layer of interacting systems that are very difficult to model, let alone wrap the head around from our Australopithecine descendant brain that wants to see everything in nice, neat, tidy little categories. And thanks to Jackson, another word everyone should popularize is monocausism, the obsession that you even find this in the science literature of people who think they want to find the cause of something when it's just as probable that all of those causes are operating simultaneously and are hard to develop, but it's not just the thing, the single thing.
Yeah, it's very frustrating to read science works where they say like, okay, there's some evidence for this thing, but those don't really matter. It's like, no, they may not be as important, but they're also playing a role.
It's one of those things where we're very good at putting things in boxes, and we like to put things in boxes, and when things don't fit in our boxes, we kind of get upset about it because those were our boxes, and we made those, and they're nice and neat and tidy, and now you're coming in here and fucking up all my boxes. It's the same thing people do with, like, gender, whether it be biological or whether it be, like, gender identity. It's the same thing like you see in politics when people, like, want these policies to fit in this certain boxes. Like, for example... easy example, because we were kind of starting to link together this kind of right-wing extremist groups with this anti-science along with this young earth creationism stuff. You end up in this situation where this doesn't fit in my box, but I've also made a really teeny tiny box. And it's like, but your box is so small, not everything can possibly fit in there. And now you're mad about it.
Well, it's like the extreme creationist position that there's either atheists who hate God or the believer.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Right.
No in between.
There are no Christians who accept evolution. Right.
Yeah.
I want to run
that's why I've always
guys.
been frustrated.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. That's why I've always been frustrated with debates between creationism, a Christianity versus atheism. Excuse me, we're the small kids on the block. It's Christianity versus all the non-Christian religions. They're the vast majority of them. So you persuade them that you're right, then worry about us atheists.
There's certainly a scenario, and that's kind of like what I like to do with the show, is to actually just promote. It is called Debate Hub. But I don't like the debate me bro style of the way things are on the internet, so I kind of like to flavor the show around discussions and around
a conversation.
These kinds of conversations, like the very, very classical, like we're talking like back in Athens style of you're gonna have
and worse,
somebody on a podium,
modern collegiate debate. Modern collegiate debate has turned into a rote talk fest where they spit stuff out at blinding speed. And another thing that I share with Richard Dawkins in a way that'll look at the world, I could never be in a conventional debate if in debate class aspect of where you would have to just randomly be assigned which position you're going to take. No, Dawkins is like me. I can't defend a position I don't believe is true. Sure. Because I don't believe it's true because it's not true. And therefore, I can't just contrive an argument. I could figure out, I suppose, how one would apologetically construct an argument. That's why a surprisingly large number of people involved in anti-evolutionism are lawyers who know how to construct an argument to defend a position independent of whether it's true. But no, you could make a law that would decree that asparagus is a form of elephants. And you could make case law on that basis, but asparagus are not elephants, and so it's a pointless argument.
Right. There seems to be like some things that fall in line that seem to have a habit of being, I don't know, what would you call it, shady? Like if you're
Sure.
taking things out and you're changing them on purpose, and then you know the person before you change it and you tweak it a little bit more, you know the person before you change it and you tweak it a little bit more, like
That's the apologetic imperative. And if you,
Yeah, I
that
don't.
it's true of any ideologue, religious, political, or any others, where they have a doctrine that they want to defend and they want to present it in a way to
Yeah,
be maximally effective to the people they're trying to persuade, or if not that, at least maximally congenial and massaging for those in the audience that already agree with them. And that
it's not always.
tendency is
Yeah,
the opposite of sound scholarship.
mm,
it's not always necessarily intentional. That also has to be emphasized. A lot of times, like because we talked about Frank Turk earlier,
Yeah.
and RJ's right. You have this idea you have to defend at all costs,
right.
and you're scrounging around looking for different arguments to support you. And if you're not an expert, like Turek isn't, he's cribbing from, like Stephen Meyer on the Cambrian stuff, and other people on genetics and whatnot who aren't geneticists, aren't paleontologists, aren't zoologists or whatever. And then Turek is like screwing these arguments up even worse because he doesn't know about these subjects and he's trying to recollect what they said, right? It's like he's like, okay, I heard it and this is what I remember, and yeah, it kind of congeals and it becomes an even
like
worse
the Jehovah's
argument.
Witness and the 27 billion year old Earth. Exactly.
I have
You
been
get the things where they're trying to tinker along with the bit, and you can feel sorry for them. And the adept ones, the skilled debaters, are ones who are good at culling the talking points efficiently. But the thing that got drummed into me, and it's a reason why I got into this from the history direction, not from the science direction, is that my historiography teacher back in college, a charming, delightful, professorial. If you think somebody that's crossed between Jimmy Stewart and James Mason, and back in an era when people would smoke a pipe in class. I mean, this was ancient times.
Back
Anyway,
in the day.
his big thing was don't ever confuse a primary with a secondary source. So if you read a quote from somebody, it may or may not be accurate, but you should never think you understand that person's position just based on that secondary squib. So that Jehovah's Witness bunch that assaulted me at the house in my jammies, coming in the early morning, when he ended the thing where I said, no, goodbye, is he comes in and says, I have a quote from Stephen Hawking. And I asked him, have you ever read Stephen Hawking? And he said, no. Just as flat out as anybody can be. And so then why are you bringing him up? You don't actually understand anything about him. You only have a little squib you picked up from a quote mine. And if you have a mind that can easily do that quote mining, boy, there's no limit to how they can slide down the rabbit hole.
Exactly what Dr. Dan was talking about on Monday.
Exactly. If you don't confuse the primary and a secondary, you use that secondary quote as a springboard. The same reason if you're looking at Wikipedia, you don't see it as the destination. You see it as a thing. Ooh, that's interesting. I'll better look that up and check it into it. That's the divide between the kinds of mindsets we're dealing with.
I went looking yesterday, and I did it live because I found out that they're putting out NFT Cookie Monsters. And I'm like,
oh, no.
who the flying fuck?
This is the tulip bulb mania of the 21st century.
Who the fuck thought this was a good idea? So I went looking, and I'm like, who's in charge of Sesame Street right now? And I went looking, and it turns out that one of the women in charge,
Disney.
It was married to somebody who helped run the Reagan and Bush campaign. And then when she divorced, she is currently now married to somebody who is part of the whole Bloomberg situation. And I'm like, oh, well, now we know where this came from. Thank you, NFT Cookie Monsters.
I think it's great that we've all collectively bullied NFT people. That I very rarely see them on. Yes. No, absolutely on Twitter now. But they were everywhere for a few months, and now. I really don't see them anymore.
Well, it is the collapse of a lot of NFTs. The market value has persuaded.
You can only get jammed so many times before you're out of money.
It is just CEOs that are behind. That's all we're seeing left over now. We saw Trump come through.
It's a pyramid scheme where they forgot to build the pyramid.
Right, exactly.
Well, you think, there's only so much money that people can get scammed out of, right? I mean, you can only get scammed so many times.
Well, this is true. There's a whole nother. Listen, there's more coming down the line on that. Come join us on Saturday. We talk about current events and such.
Yeah.
I also have another one planned coming up about about
What was it, Bitcoin?
squeeze.
With well, there was Bitcoin.
Yep.
The guy Sam Bankman-Fried, where he like stole all the people's money, and
Yep, we
you know
talked about
they
that.
lost like millions of people have lost or money, and or people have lost millions of dollars at least. So yeah,
Yup.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh,
And
there's
I
more
think
coming
if
down
you
the
looked
line.
at it, in terms of the mindset and methodology of the people who fall down those rabbit holes, that although they're dealing with a very different topic than creationism or some other things, the cognitive architecture of those people, their easy willingness to get onto a bandwagon, their easy willingness to accept secondary authority as accurate, their inability or disinclination to do fact checking of material and background research, that it's the same dynamic as people who are going gaga over a Kent Hovind video.
Yeah, you've actually stumbled onto my
Even though
last
they're
question
thinking about a
because
different
we
thing.
are in the last 5 minutes, so I just want to make sure we got this one in.
Okay.
You stumbled right into it because we've been live for a little over an hour now.
I've been stumbling all my life here.
All right. There's something to be said about like the mindset, and I don't want to go as far as to say the psychology, but the habits that these that people who kind of push young Earth creationism seem to, or at least people who believe the people who you're countering in your book. Is there do you have any kind of idea about how to outreach to this, or how to educate people or talk to those kinds of people?
That one is out of my wheelhouse in a way because I'm too prickly.
Oh,
But
yeah, I get
educators
that.
have had
I
to
get
deal.
told that a lot.
Educators have had to deal with this issue, and simply throwing data at people doesn't work. So you have to have the ability, from a teacher's point of view, to kind of put a little nugget of information that can cause them to start researching that, and that can grow like a little oyster shell, around it, pearl. And that there's actual papers and stuff that have been done on the thing that applies also in the anti-vax case about how simply barraging people with information, they will tend to want to just pull the wagons together, and they become less open to changing their mind. Now, I have not nearly the sanguine temperament to be able to pull that little trick off. Somebody I think like Erica Gutsick-Gibbon, I think, has much smoother capacity to get into things in that respect. But I would say that if you have that Tortucan mind shell issue, that little word that I come up with, and I want people to use more, that is the diagnostic element, Tortucans functionally don't change their mind no matter what you do to them. That they're impervious to education. And overall, if you look at that 150-year history of creationism, how many of them have actually changed their mind? What I would contend is if they don't have that propensity for secondary source addiction, this is not how anyone sees Darwin, that propensity for secondary source addiction, then they'll wean themselves off of it on their own. You find ex-creationists like Dapper Dino and Erica and that they've figured it out on their own. Whereas if somebody, even if they come into it quite late, somebody like Philip Johnson, the intelligent design guru who basically jump-started the entire intelligent design movement. The guy was not stupid. He got into Harvard when he was 16. He's by any objective standards an accomplished and brilliant mind. And yet, in his addiction to secondary sources, he's no better than Kent Hovind.
All right. What do you think, Jackson?
Yeah, I in the debates that I've had, or that Dapper and I have done, yeah, RJ's right. Like, yeah, you can throw data at them, but you also have to give them the sources, tell them go through the citations, go through all the citations on our own videos.
You have to convince people to do some of their own work, so at least they can not just be told what to do. It sounds like what you're telling me.
Right.
A couple episodes ago.
Part of the problem with that is, also is like if they're more, I guess they're more kind of innocent or whatever. They're not like a hardcore like Hovind follower or something. They're like someone who's maybe heard some stuff about this. They're not sure. And then you can kind of put them onto it more easily. Whereas if it's someone like, I don't know, like a Standing for Truth or something, someone like this, where it doesn't matter how much data you give them, how many times you point out that they're wrong, how many times they admit that they're wrong, and then push their arguments again anyways. Like, it doesn't matter. They're not going to change your mind.
I encountered a kid just a couple weeks ago at that Rathdrum talk from the guy from CMI. And I talked about it on my Evolution Hour, that it was one of the saddest things I'd seen in quite a long time. Young kid, maybe 16, 17, somewhere around, he was a teenager. And He was curious about my thing that I was pointing out about the soft tissue thing, and I compiled a whole listing for the new book, listing all the major papers and the documentation on it. And I had printed this thing up as a little temporary file that I would have as ammunition to discuss the soft tissue issue with the scientist, the speaker. But it turns out that I was showing it to this kid, and he's looking over and he says, "Can I have a copy of that?" And I said, "Sure." He says, "Here, I'll just give you this one." And he holds on to it for probably only a minute, because eventually he says, "I trust my dad, and my dad trusts the other guy, and I don't need to look at this." And he hands it back to me. And if you have that kind of a mindset where your faith in the dogma is so, in a way, fragile that you are afraid to actually put it to the test by looking at the source material to see whether or not any of your things make any sense, then nothing is ever going to persuade them. Whereas there were
a friend in that case. You need somebody close to them that they trust equally.
Yes. It may work. It depends on how they fall on the Tortugan Index. But when you look at the number of anti-evolutionists that there have been, and look at their whole core life, the vast majority of them are ones that, regardless of when they became converted to the creationist cause, they stick with it down to their dying day. And all the evidence in the world isn't dislodging Henry Morris and Dwayne.
Yeah. And there's different motivations for things like that, like whether it be clout, money, comfortability, et cetera, right? And like,
when you get into the thing where they are a preacher and they have a flock and they have a church behind them and their livelihood depends on it. This is a thing that connects up with. I knew that one of the founders of the clergy project that deals with people in the clergy movement.
Tell them to come and reach out to me and come on.
Yeah, and the large number of those, what options do they have if they leave the church? They're ostracized by their family, and they have what do you do? You have no skill set,
Right.
And so there's a tremendous difficulty on that. But then you look at somebody like Cam, who's pulling down 150 grand a year as the head of AIG. You've got Steve Meyer, who gets about the same amount of money over at the Discovery Institute. Now, if they do have any doubts, which I suspect they don't, but if they do, how likely are they to say it when, boy, that could pull the plug on their livelihood?
It's not even worth it to look. It's not even worth it to challenge at that point. Like, why? For what? Like, nothing but negative as far as they would be concerned.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's a funky thing.
Yeah, we should look to wrap up there. Do you guys have anything besides the book that you want to shill? And then I'll get to shilling the book in the end and we'll wrap up.
I think that'll work.
I don't know.
Shilling is fun.
All right, RJ, what do you got for us?
Oh, well, Evolution Slam Dunk, which is the book that I wrote on the reptile-mammal transition. The mammal paleontologist Christine Janis said that it was an incredible tour de force. And so that's not a minor league endorsement in that area. Yeah. And then, of course, the rocks were there. We will be churning out more of them on there. We're trying to set a standard of scholarship that is rigorous for somebody at the college level, but is also a funky, fun read that you may get a laugh or two out of it as you move along and going, holy shit, I had no idea
That's
that
how
was
I
happening.
felt. That's how I felt on Monday and also now today.
I think if anybody goes to a thing without learning something new, that there's always some new aspect of it. And if I learn something really interesting, I want to share it.
I, in fact, demand that if you learn something in my streams, you need to share that stream. It's demand. You have to do it. I told you so. Jackson, what do you got going on for you? Working on anything special?
Not really special.
Come on now.
The usual stuff, I guess. Tomorrow, instead of having a Thursday show, I'll be mirroring the chat that Dapper and I had with Jeremy Spry a few weeks ago. I'm still continuing my series on Richard Dawkins' book, The Ancestor's Tale. We're getting there. I think we're like halfway through it.
Every episode of that, I find sources that I wasn't aware of that related to these little points, and I'm frequently making notes of it and saying, ooh, this is an interesting bit. Let's see if we can sneak some of this into Rocks 2.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Oh, you were just making more work for yourself, Jackson.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is what it is. It comes with the
Right.
territory, you know.
Well, go find Jackson at Jackson's channel as well. There are links down below. You can also find Jackson on Dapper's channel as well if you're interested in whatever he's got going on over there.
No, don't approach me.
I propose that we need to get like a whole crew of us. So, like, bring in Erica as well, bring in Dr. Dan, you and RJ and Dapper and Bend, and we all sit down and watch Exodus together and all pull out our hair collectively. They've got a round table. We need to have a round table,
Yeah.
and I want to be invited because it was my idea.
We go around the table if we're able.
All right, that's
I don't
that's all I'm
know.
saying. Okay.
I don't know much about that point in history, so I think I'd be useless.
Listen, I assure you, you will not be. All right. RJ does YouTube on Sunday nights, so go and check RJ out. Again, links are down below. I will
Early
go
Monday
and-
morning, depending on your time zone.
Depending on your time zone. I'll make sure to get, if there's more links that need to be added, I will make sure they are added down below. You can also find a link to their book down below, as well as in the live chat. It is pinned to the top, so if you're interested, please go and check out their book. I assure you, you will have a grand old time, and if you're a creationist, enjoy, motherfucker. We're gonna
Not only is it heavy enough to knock them over the head physically, but
Ooh.
also it's splendid in terms of the content that you can knock
the
them over the head with.
largest they could have possibly made it on Amazon. You will not find a bigger book on Amazon. I'm going to get out of here. We will see you tomorrow. I've been Chesh, your master debater. Thank you for joining us in Debate Hub, and we will see you next time. See you tomorrow. Bye.